They always say revenge is about living well, but I learned something far more precise. The real power is sitting at a dinner table with people who believe they already won, letting them smile, letting them talk, and watching the moment slowly arrive when the entire story turns against them without them noticing. That night I understood that silence can be louder than any argument when used at the right time and in the right room. My name is Harold Bennett, and most people in my town think they understand me at first glance. I live in Beckley, West Virginia. I wear simple clothes, I drive an old pickup truck with a cracked mirror, and I spend mornings taking care of a small garden. What nobody sees is that I built one of the largest logistics and manufacturing companies in the country, a company that moves products across many states and employs thousands of people. For more than 2 decades, I kept my life split into worlds. In one world, I was just another quiet man fixing fences and watering plants. In the other world, I was the owner of Bennett Harbor Industries, a company powerful enough to shape entire supply chains. I never needed attention, and in fact I avoided it completely. The less people noticed me, the more control I had over everything that mattered. My daughter Megan never shared my love for quiet living. She was bright, confident, and full of energy that reminded me of her mother. When she brought a young man named Evan Carter into my life, I studied him carefully. He had charm, intelligence, and a presence that made people listen. Something about him told me he believed life always opened doors for him, no matter what stood in the way. Evan was not a bad person in the way people usually describe bad people. He was simply certain of himself in a way that made him overlook details. When I quietly reviewed his background and work history, everything looked strong. He had talent and leadership ability, so when Megan told me she was serious about him, I made a decision that even surprised me. I placed him inside my company without him ever knowing the truth. Evan believed he had been hired through a top executive search process. He thought he earned his position after interviews and evaluations. In reality, every step of that process was guided by me. He became the chief executive of Bennett Harbor Industries without ever realizing the company already belonged to the father of the woman he planned to marry. For over a year I watched him lead, and he performed better than expected. Then one evening Evan invited me to dinner. He told me his parents were visiting and wanted to meet me properly. Something in his tone felt slightly rehearsed, as if the invitation carried more weight than he was saying out loud. My instincts told me there was a reason behind it, but I had spent too many years in business to ignore a meeting just because it felt unusual. The restaurant was elegant in a quiet way, the kind of place where everything is designed to make people feel important. Evan greeted me at the entrance, polished and confident. Inside, his parents were already seated. His father introduced himself as Richard Carter, and his mother as Elaine Carter. Their smiles were polite, but I could feel tension hiding behind them, the kind that comes from waiting a long time for a moment like this. For the first part of dinner, everything felt controlled. They asked questions, made comments about work, and carefully guided the conversation. Evan seemed slightly distracted, as if he was aware that something underneath the surface was about to rise. Then Richard placed a thick envelope on the table. It was done slowly, deliberately, as if the object carried years of preparation and meaning. Richard explained that the past could no longer stay buried. He spoke about a man named Victor Marsh and claimed that I had destroyed his life decades ago. According to him, Victor was ruined by unfair pressure and forced decisions that left him with nothing. As he spoke, I could see emotion building in his voice, not just anger but long-held grief shaped into certainty. Victor Marsh was not a stranger to my memory. Many years ago I worked with him when we were both young and building a small business together. Over time I discovered he had been quietly taking money and redirecting clients. I documented everything carefully before confronting him. He was given a choice to leave peacefully or face legal consequences. He chose to leave and disappear. Richard believed a different version of that story. To him, Victor was a victim and I was the cause of his downfall. What he did not know was that Victor had told his version of events for years, shaping it into something that protected his pride. Richard grew up believing that story completely. Sitting there across from me, he was not seeking truth. He was seeking balance for a wound he carried his entire life. As Richard demanded answers, Evan finally began to understand that this dinner was not what he thought it was. He looked between me and his parents, confusion growing into discomfort. Then he admitted something that changed the direction of the entire room. He revealed that his father had warned him about my past long before he ever met me and suggested that his relationship with my daughter might be part of a larger plan. The room shifted immediately. Evan realized he had been placed in the middle of something he never fully understood. His confidence cracked for the first time. Richard tried to justify everything by saying it was about family honor and correcting a past injustice, but Evan no longer accepted that explanation. He saw the situation clearly for what it was, a long-prepared attempt to settle an old conflict using him as a tool. That was when I placed my own envelope on the table. I explained calmly that every document Richard brought was incomplete and shaped by a single perspective. I presented records from the original business accounts, transaction histories, and signed statements that confirmed what actually happened between me and Victor Marsh. Nothing had been hidden. Everything had been documented in real time years ago. As I spoke, Richard slowly lost control of his certainty. The confidence in his voice weakened as the facts replaced the story he had carried for so long. Elaine looked down, unable to continue pretending the situation was simple. Evan listened in silence, realizing that his entire position in my company, his marriage, and his future had all been built around assumptions he never questioned. Then I revealed the final truth. I told Evan that the company he had been running belonged to me from the beginning. Every decision, every structure, every opportunity he had experienced was created under my ownership. He had not been hired by strangers. He had been placed carefully into a position I designed. The realization hit him slowly, like something he could not fully process at once. Evan asked why I would do something like that. I told him it was never about control or testing him in a cruel way. It was about understanding character under pressure and seeing whether he could stand in truth when everything around him collapsed. His response mattered more than anything else that had happened that night, and in that moment I could see something new forming in him, responsibility replacing confusion. By the end of the night, Richard and Elaine left the restaurant carrying the weight of a story that no longer supported itself. Evan stayed behind for a moment, trying to understand who he was in relation to everything he had just learned. I told him that Monday would not be about secrets or manipulation anymore. It would be about leadership and clarity moving forward. When I drove home that night, I felt no excitement or celebration. I simply understood that every long game eventually reaches its final move. Some people spend their lives building revenge. I spent mine building something stronger than that. I built understanding, patience, and timing. And in the end, those things always speak louder than anger ever could.